B-17 just arrived here in Marion, Indiana, and I have 6 World War II veterans. All these gentlemen served on a B-17, just like Yankee Lady that's behind us. I'm with Gene Estel, and Gene is from Marion, Indiana. Gene, this airplane just landed. What went through your mind?
One of the most beautiful planes it's ever built. I love them.
How long has it been since you've seen one, Gene?
Well, I was fortunate enough to fly on the one that came in on 201, and other than that, I hadn't seen one since it got shot down 64 years ago.
Gene, tell us briefly what happened.
Well, on the first mission over Germany, I was shot down, bailed out, our plane blew up, and I became a prisoner of war, and I was a prisoner of war for 14 months.
Born and raised in Marion is Earl Harrell. Earl, you came right out of school and went into the service right out of Marion.
Yes. In fact, Gene and I enlisted together. We graduated from high school together, and we decided that we was going in the Air Force, or Air Corps then. And so we went to all the training here in the States, and I ended up over there a week before he did. And my second mission was his first, and that was the first daylight raid that the 8th Air Force made on Berlin. And subsequently, we went there 8 more times, but Gene went down on his first. And I finished 30 missions, and I finished them 2 weeks before D-Day. So they shot at us all the way in and all the way out.
From Indianapolis, Indiana, is Paul Ellis. Paul, what did you think when you saw this B-17 fly over a little bit ago?
I felt like Jim and the others. It was a big thrill to watch that B-17 come in for a landing and taxi in. It just puts tingles down your spine. That's all there is to it.
How old were you when you were fighting on this B-17?
I was 18 years old. I graduated from high school one day from Newcastle, Indiana. Went in the service the next. I was one of 4 in World War II. And I tell the boys, my 2 younger brothers are too young to be in World War II, but we were both in the Korean War. So God brought us all back safe and sound from the combat, all of us. And one thing I remember, I was telling the fellas a while ago that on my first mission, I'll never forget it as if it was yesterday, I was in a waist gun because you flew with an experienced crew, the right waist, and they had chaff that you throw out to mess up the German radar. Well, in the first burst of flak, from the 88 to 98, I thought, well, if one will do, I was throwing that chaff out fast as I could. And that's when the sergeant on the left gun turned around and said, my God, what are you doing? I said, well, you said throw it out and mess up the radar. He said, yeah, it'll mess up our guys back there too. They'll have to feather their prop. So that's my first mission. That's my story.
Okay.
I was lucky. Now I had to fly 14, then I come home.
Jack Bitter from Carmel, Indiana. Jack, what was it like fighting on the B-17?
The first mission, believe it or not, was very exciting. It was very interesting. We didn't run into much opposition, they told me. The second mission, and from then on, I was scared to death. And I'm glad that nobody has to go through it again, I hope. My crew was on a mission to bomb Berlin. I was kept down for a practice mission for Deputy Lead Bombardier, and the crew was shot down, managed to land in Russia. They were held prisoner by the Russians for almost 3 months and finally made it back to the United States lines. It was a wonderful experience. I don't want to go through it again, though.
Jack, you spent your whole childhood right here in Marion, Indiana.
Yes.
Did you ever think you'd see a B-17 land in your hometown?
Well, no, but when I saw it fly in this morning, I thought, man, that's shiny, and it must have gone through the car wash before it got here. But yeah, that was my first observation. They took it through the car wash.
Don't you think it's the most beautiful airplane ever built?
It sure is today, that's right.
Tell us about a mission that really stands out in your mind, and how old were you?
Well, let me tell you something. I didn't take any missions. You missed my story back up there. Okay. You know, my wife was a nurse, and we got married in 46, but we corresponded and dated before that. And she was in 3 years with Patton's Army. 19 months, had 5 battle stars, and I was scheduled to go, our crew to go to Europe when the war ended, and so I didn't have to go. So she said I did a good job guarding the Gulf of Mexico. I couldn't belong to the VFW, so she said she would join the VFW and I could join the Ladies Auxiliary.
Well, well, let me ask you this. What was her rank?
Well, she was a first lieutenant, yes, first lieutenant.
So you've been saying yes, ma'am, for quite a few years.
Well, she's been gone 7 years, but for 57 years, she outranked me and told me so.
Ray Miller, co-pilot on a B-17. Ray, you now live in Indianapolis. How did you feel when you saw this airplane fly over a little bit ago?
I was certainly glad that I was asked that question because I saw that beautiful bird come in, and I have to admit, tears came in my eyes and I felt a lump in my throat. And I suddenly had an empathy for our ground crew who stood waiting for us to come back, and they sweated it out. And here I was sweating out the return of our B-17. I want to thank you for the Air Force for the procedure they had in sending inexperienced people up in the air with experienced crews. In my case, it was a blessing. It saved my life. Thank you.
I certainly want to thank Ray and Inga and everyone here, and I hope the people in Marion realize how hard that you people have worked, and it's great to see this ship again. Thank you, and God bless you.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was going to say, but I would like to add that the real heroes are the ones that didn't get back.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
That's right.
Bob Bomar, LaSalle, Michigan, maintenance and flight engineer, 18 years.
Gary Shelton, Farmington Hills, Michigan, loadmaster for the past 12 years.
Ray Christensen, Saline, Michigan, 7-year member, maintenance.
Dennis Kenward, Sterling Heights, Michigan, general crew member for 4 years.
Dave Laurie, Redford, Michigan, flight engineer and mechanic, about 13 years.
Dave Wright, Belleville, Michigan. I'm a flex ride coordinator for 5 years.
And I'm Dwayne Nelson from Atlanta, Georgia. A pilot, been with them 13 years.
Norm Ellickson, Milan, Michigan, flight engineer, crew chief, 28 years.
John Rule, Milan, Michigan, pilot, 5 years.
We're in front of the B-17 Yankee Lady. And Dwayne, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, you come all the way to Michigan to fly this airplane.
Oh, absolutely. You do it several times a year, and quite a few times a year. And I'll fly up, or I'll ride the motorcycle up to fly the airplane.
What is it about the B-17 that's so special to you?
Well, of course, the airplane is very special, but it's the people that you work with, and the stories from the veterans that come on out to the airport. That's what's really, really special.
For a year now, Norm, we've been planning and working on bringing this airplane here. Today was a very special day.
Yeah, we enjoy it very much, Ray. As you know, we're here in, 2001, and it doesn't seem that long ago, but we're sure glad to be back.
Well, we're glad to have you here, and the 6 veterans that came out and saw the airplane. You see this a lot. It's amazing, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Just about we're out every weekend, and at every show we get World War II veterans come up, and some will come up and touch the airplane and walk away crying. Some will refuse to get on the airplane. They evidently had a bad experience, and some will finally get on, and I think then they lost a 200-pound monkey that they didn't know they had on their back. So it's very enjoyable for us.
Depending what life experience they had on the airplane is how they react, isn't it?
Oh, that's very true, yeah.
Norm, in the peak of World War II, they used to put 1,000 of these up a day. How did they manage that?
I'm not sure. I'm too young, but no, they did, and I've even talked to older people that were young kids laying on the ground in the Netherlands, and I had one old gentleman say he and his buddy one day counted 960 some or something like that on the way to Germany. So on a good day, they did get 1,000 up.
And in the early part of the war, not all of them came back.
Oh, very true. I used to have the statistics that they lost, but in the early part, they didn't have fighter escort all the way to the target, so they lost a lot of them.
If you were 24 years old, you were really old, weren't you?
That's true. You were the old man.
Grand Rapids, Michigan is Bill Lewis. Bill, you have a really unique Pulse. Tell us about your Pulse Autocycle.
Well, the Pulse Autocycle was purchased by Coors Brewing Company, and they bought, I understand, 4, and they had their logos put on it, and they would travel around the country and just to promote their product, and they'd go to parades and racetracks and just do parade laps at racetracks.
So really it was a low-time Pulse, but one yet that's been seen by thousands of people.
Oh, yeah. It's a popular beer and a popular... the Pulse is just popular. No matter who's got it and where they drive it, they stop traffic.
Bill, what got you interested in Pulse Autocycles?
Well, I was working on a political campaign, knocking on doors and getting out the vote for a candidate, and I walked by this one house, and in the driveway was a Pulse. So I knocked on the door and I said, I'm working on this campaign and we want you to vote for our candidate, and what is that in the driveway? And we spent about 20 minutes talking about it, and he informed me about everything, answered all my questions, like does it run on electricity, does it fly, and all the questions we all get. And he said, and then I asked him, I said, where can I find one of these? Because I want one of these things. And he said there's they're meeting in Marion in 3 weeks, and everybody's going to bring their Pulse there, and you can talk to people. Maybe somebody will sell you one. So I went. And through that meeting, I made a connection that eventually got me one.
Serial number?
We're 317.
And what engine's in this Pulse?
It's a Gold Wing 1200cc.
It really makes people smile, doesn't it?
It sure does. Yeah, I mean, people wave at you all the time. It's like you're in a parade or something.
Bill, you got an interesting hat on. Yester Dog.
Yes.
What's that represent?
That's a restaurant that I own in Grand Rapids, in the Easttown section of Grand Rapids. It's a hot dog restaurant, and that's all we sell is hot dogs. And the Yester part is that it's kind of looks like it was there in the 1940s. And all the paraphernalia on the wall is original 1930s or 40s advertising and stuff.
Is it a drive-in or inside sit-down?
No, it's just inside sit-down. There's a man named Adam Hers that went to a high school, East Grand Rapids High School, right down the street from us, and he used to hang around there with his friends. And this guy ended up writing a screenplay and used my restaurant as a model for the movie, and the movie was American Pie. And it went to #1 in the nation and stuff. And and he sent me a movie poster and signed it and all that stuff. So that was kind of exciting.
Very interesting. Well, isn't it all about the people? When you go to the Autocycle rally, you see all the interesting autocycles, not the flying crews and everything, but don't you meet the most interesting people?
But I'll tell you, this gang of guys and gals that own these Pulses are really great, fun people, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Hi, I'm Steve Schmidt, and I'm at Summer Place today with Ray and Judy Johnson. Ray's been very active, as you all know, with the fly-in cruise-in for many years. And do you have any special stories you'd like to tell about this yellow Pulse? It's a beautiful one.
Well, Steve, I met Chuck and Linda Ferguson in 1996 and saw a Pulse Autocycle, and I thought, what an incredible vehicle. It'd be a wonderful way to promote the flying cruise-in. That's really what I thought. And Chuck and Linda brought theirs. We've told that story. And that's the result of this. A gentleman named Bill Center brought this Autocycle to Marion's. First time I saw it, it was yellow. It had the airplane tail on it. As you know, we like yellow. And one thing led to another. And without thinking real hard, I made a decision. And the next time I saw Judy, I told her that she now owns an Autocycle, and Steve, it really is hers.
Well, that's pretty cool, and you've put a lot of miles on this.
Yeah, I have.
Do you have any stories you'd like to tell about, maybe experiences?
Our daughter was helping take care of an 86-year-old lady, and she was quite ill, but Michelle and I drove up, and we took her for a Pulse ride, and she had to change her clothes and get her makeup on. She put a yellow shirt on so that she would be just perfect. And we took her down to her daughter's office, and her daughter had no clue. And then we said, where else would you like to go? We had to go to the hairdressers, and we went in there. I went in and we honked, and they all came out and talked to her, and she was just thrilled. They said she had the best day. Within a week, she had passed away. We said the neatest thing about having this is just you put a smile on people's face, and everybody's just happy to see you.
Yeah, that's great. I know when I drive mine around, you get a lot of thumbs up. And
yeah, well, it's well known in Marion. I'll tell you what, if you drive it down through town, it seems like somebody will say, hey, we saw you go by. And we have the website, flyingcruisein.com, and it's pretty much associated with that. And it's a wonderful way. It gives you opportunities to talk about the fly-in and the Autocycle rally. And both have grown every year, and really the Autocycles have been an incredible contribution to the flying cruise, and there's just not a more perfect vehicle because of the look and the history with Jim Bede. From Owasso, Michigan, I have Linda and Steve Schmidt. The Pulse Autocycles were manufactured in Owasso.
it all started about 2001. We had a rally in Owasso, Michigan, and Chuck and Linda Ferguson were there, and so were Dave and Janelle Amstead. And after I started the web page, about 4 years later, I thought, you know, maybe we ought to own one of these things. So we bought this from Don Weekly in Owasso, and here we are today. This is about our fourth time, probably, or fifth time being at Marion.
Linda, what did you think when Steve come home and said, we're going to buy one of these?
I wasn't surprised. I had planned on getting him a T-shirt that said, I don't have a pulse, so that he could come to the rally with something.
Well, both of you, interesting to me, are private pilots, and so this kind of goes along with that love of flying. Well, Steve, what's the most exciting part of running the website and being associated with these Autocycles?
Oh, we've just had a great time, and every time we meet somebody new, it's a new story. It's a new story about another Pulse, and they all have stories.
Well, again, www.autocycles.org. And now, brand new is the Autocycle channel on YouTube, www.youtube.com/autocycles. We link back and forth between Autocycles and Flying Cruise In. And what a wonderful thing to have the Autocycle Rally in conjunction with the Flying Cruise-In every year, Steve.
Yes, and on our YouTube channel, it's very interesting because we have old video, 20-year-old tape of former dealers talking about the Pulse. We have Jim Bede being interviewed, and so it's just great.
Steve, to belong to the Autocycle organization, you don't have to own an Autocycle. You just got to be interested in one, right?
That's right. And there's no dues or fees, so this has been just a great club.
Jim Bede. Jim designed the Autocycles and is well known in the aviation world as a airplane designer who is really ahead of his time. Jim, the Autocycle really looks a lot like the BD5.
Yes, I guess it's a somewhat of a coincidence there. We knew the aerodynamic characteristics of the BD5 very well, and when we were trying to design the Autocycle, we wanted to get the aerodynamics there. It's not just streamlining, but how it handles in crosswinds and things like that. And so therefore it became a real close similarity to it.
So really, the Autocycle is a totally new design.
Oh yes, right. There was nothing else we could find that we could get information about. We had to, shall we say, learn on its own. And I stole a lot of the data from the BD5 jet versions of it and so on, and a lot of stuff about motorcycles themselves, and blended two technologies together.
When you designed the Autocycle, really the concept was fuel mileage and the fact that most cars only have one or two people in them anyway.
True, that's exactly right. There was one other thing. I had a bunch of buddies who had regular bikes, and they would ride them in the summertime a few times, and they sat in the garage all winter long. And I said, gee, there's a beautiful power plant, a well-designed engine, transmissions, lightweight wheels and brakes and so on. Why can't we have it so it can be used all year round? And at the same time get the mileage out. So the idea was to get the aerodynamics down, get the weight down, get the performance up, and be able to put two people in there and let them drive in the snow, in the rain, anytime.
Well, about 350 of them were built, and because of the economy at the time and the way the world was, the factory did close. Do you see in the future, Jim, do you see maybe a renewal of the Autocycle?
Oh, I'm quite certain it will be, yeah. It may be a slight variation is because there are some new materials and new things out, but the concept is still there. The idea of being able to have people move themselves efficiently, safely, in total comfort is what the Autocycle will do. And with the fuel prices as high as they are and a little chance of them going down lower, there'll be real need for the vehicle.
You're well known with pilots really all over the world for all your designs, and the Grumman Yankee, the BD4, the BD5. Do you have a favorite airplane that you really love that's your design?
Well, I can't really say. Each one had certain characteristics that, to me as an engineer, were challenging and therefore a lot of fun. The BD5 was so small that we literally had to write the books for that. But then I made a BD10, which is two-place, and used a big Learjet engine in it. It went Mach 0.92, real high performance, very expensive but phenomenal thing. And that was a real engineering challenge because we had the same problems that you'd have in a military fighter, but we had real simplicity of controls and hydraulics and so on. And we got a couple of designs on the drawing board, actually on the computer, that will look similar to this, that'll even be better.
We might see a new Autocycle design?
Well, I wouldn't call it an Autocycle, but it would be a vehicle that maybe you can drive and fly.
Jim, we appreciate you visiting us here in Marion, Indiana at the Flying Cruise-In, and we hope that you'll consider coming back next year.
Oh, absolutely. The hospitality here is just fantastic. The people are fantastic. It is an absolute wonderful place to be. I recommend any and everybody who has anything to do with autocycles, airplanes, cars, please come here.
Thank you.